I had the great pleasure of virtually sitting down with Dr. Howard Schubiner for a really juicy interview over pelvic and urinary issues. He's a mind-body medicine pioneer, the author of the book Unlearn Your Pain, and he's really pushing forward our understanding of mind-body medicine and doing so with scientific and clinical research. In this particular interview, we get into what is really causing pelvic pain or pelvic floor dysfunction. And what about overactive bladder and other urinary issues? How can the brain be creating that? So you're going to really love this interview. Definitely leave any comments below. And we thank Dr. Schubiner for this. Everyone, I'm here with Dr. Howard Schubiner. It's such an honor. I have loved your work. I've been heavily integrating it with my own work, helping others to overcome chronic pelvic, urinary, sexual issues. And it's been the most convenient and eloquently described package, you could say, to explain what's going on with someone's body. Not just in the root region of their body, but, oh, this is also what's causing my IBS or my headaches or the other things. It's all connected. So it's an honor to chat with you, and so that we can bring a little more specificity, though, to this part of the body. And thank you. Are you excited about the chat? How's it going over there?
I'm so excited to talk to you, Michael.
I can tell you were like, when am I talking to Michael Hodge?
I can't wait. What did we say at the opening? We're going to shed light into the world.
That's exactly right. Oh, I love that. So we'll get into some specific questions because I think that is really helpful. Most likely people have read your book or listened to some of your materials already. If not, Unlearn Your Pain is an extremely good book. There are lots of interviews. So we're going to assume in this particular conversation, they have some basic understanding of how mind-body symptoms are created. And I really like using the term mind-body syndrome personally. I'm using it in a book that I'm writing. I use it in the programs we have because it's very obvious what we're talking about. Your mind affects your body.
Yeah,
and a syndrome is a bundle of symptoms. And
right. And it can also just be called a condition or an issue. Sometimes a syndrome sounds like there's, a clinical term, a medical term, but, just even a mind-body condition is just, very, very clear, I think, and very basic, because what we're talking about is very simple, really, at its core. It's very simple that the mind, as you said, the mind affects the body. And it turns out our brains actually create what we experience. And so this idea of predictive processing that has emerged in the neurosciences is a huge game changer for all of us, because when Dr. Starno started his work, he knew that the mind was causing the symptoms. But now we know scientifically how the brain actually literally creates not only what we feel in our body, but what we see and what we hear. So that's really been an explosion of information that I think is really propelling our field further in terms of the science and the understanding.
No, absolutely. And even the reason why I personally choose to use mind-body syndrome, it's really because you're doing such great work, you and many others in the field. So there is a term you can Google. You can look up TMS as well, attention myositis syndrome. And now there's a body of work around mind-body syndrome, TMS, or psychophysiologic disorders. And that gives people confidence because they're like, oh, this isn't just something one guy is saying. It's the mind-body. But there is verified, valid evidence, which is what I'm so grateful to you for doing, because you stand with conviction because you have evidence backing it up. And that's also a big reason why I point towards a particular name.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're working on many levels, but one of the most important levels is the research that we're doing. And we've published in our group several randomized controlled trials showing that this work is effective and more effective than standard therapies for chronic painful conditions. And there's literally five new research studies starting this year. So we're really moving forward on that front.
Absolutely. So I'll get into a specific question now, because with a lot of men and women that deal with pelvic pain specifically, there's a belief that other injuries can lead to pelvic pain. especially those that are connected to the pelvis, so within the anatomy of the body. And I found on a particular pelvic health website recently, this was on their website, changes in hip mechanics, soft tissue, and strength or coordination may contribute to pelvic symptoms if this affects the route of the pudendal nerve through the obturator muscle and fascia. So I'm curious, from your perspective of this, does a previous injury, such as in the hip or the hamstring or somewhere more closely connected to the pelvis, have the ability to create chronic pain if that previous injury has been a while back? Or what's your perception on this?
My perception would be, my medical opinion would be no. No. The injuries heal. And if someone has a hip injury, the hip injury will heal. If they have a tendonitis or bursitis, if they have a fracture, if they have a muscle pull, all those injuries heal. And if they've healed and they're symptom-free, and then weeks, months, or years later, they're suddenly developing pelvic pain. The reason that doctors and physical therapists say that is because they can't fathom that the pain could be coming from something other than a purely physical cause. So they say, well, it was probably from that old injury. An old injury can teach the brain how to create a certain type of pain. When you get an injury, you get pain, and the brain is creating that pain, but the brain is also learning that pain. And then later, months or years later, those neural circuits for that painful condition are still there and can be learned, or can be reactivated by the brain. And the idea that a hip problem is going to cause pressure on the pudendal nerve does not make sense to me. It's just anatomically, I do not think that's possible.
So yeah, what I found happens with a lot of people is they think it could be a previous injury, or they might think, oh, I have a pelvic tilt, or I have a really tight hamstring. I've just always had a really tight hamstring, or etc. Like it was a sports injury or just a weird mobility thing going on in their body. So they look to do stretches. They typically go on YouTube. They try to figure out, how do I stretch this out? Or how do I do pelvic floor stretches? Because now I have pelvic tension or pelvic pain, and I think it's connected.
Right.
And then they might, I'll go to physical therapy. But what happens is, I think this is what muddies the water for people. They'll start to do stretches and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel a little better now,
Sure.
right? Because I feel like my hamstrings more open up and my pelvic tension went down. And then that kind of gets them stuck in this teeter-totter. Like, what's your perspective on helping someone discern this is, biomechanical, or this is something that your brain is creating, like you just mentioned?
Yeah, exactly. And this is a super important area. And of course, what happens is if the danger signal is going on in the brain, that can cause the muscles to be tight. What can cause the muscles to be tense? And when you do stretches or yoga or massage or whatever, chiropractic, the muscles are loosened up. You say, oh, I'm feeling better. And then an hour later or a day later or a week later, the brain's making those muscles tight again. And so as you talk about the root cause, to get to the root cause is to understand where it's coming from. And how do we do that? Well, we're just in the process of publishing this paper in the Journal of Pain about chronic neck and back pain. And in this paper, it's the first time that the criteria, what I call the FIT criteria, F-I-T criteria, are being published in a peer-reviewed journal. And the FIT criteria are the way that we determine if a particular symptom is coming from the brain or coming from a structural problem in the body. In other words, is it F, functional, meaning it's in a wide area, meaning that there's no injury to explain it, that the tests have been normal, meaning that the pain is spreading over time, the pain occurred without a specific injury. If it's inconsistent, this is the I. If the pain varies, better in the morning or worse in the afternoon, it changes day to day. It comes and goes away. It shifts to different places. Sometimes it's in one part of the pelvis. Sometimes it's another part of the pelvis. We see this all the time. And the trigger, the FIT, the T part of it, is if the pain is triggered by sound or light or stress or the weather, or it's triggered by um, movements that are inconsistent. So sometimes a movement will trigger the pain in one day, but the same movement might not trigger the pain the other day. Structural problems are consistent. They're consistent. I had a lady the other day, she said, I know this is a structural problem because the MRI shows that there's a structural problem. And I said, well, tell me about your pain. She says, well, it goes away for a few weeks at a time, and then it comes back, and then it goes away again. Well, how's that a structural problem? So many people with pelvic pain syndrome say, well, now the pain is, I get this rectal pain, it's really bad, but then it hurts in the glutes. And then that goes away, and then it hurts in the groin or the vulva or the testicles. And if the pain is moving around, then we know for sure that it's not a structural problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm really glad that the fit criteria is going to be in a published study in that way. That's awesome to hear. I'm curious about this because when people read your book and they're getting into this information, a lot of times they focus so much on the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, and they're like, I didn't have any of those. I had a really good childhood. I also seem to be okay. I have a happy life, it seems. I have a happy wife, good family, etc. I've had chronic pelvic pain or whatever it is for 4 years. It won't go away.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to someone who they feel like they had a great childhood, they're not seeing anything back there, they don't really understand the ramp up, the longer term ramp up of the sensitization? What could they look for now, you could say?
Well, I had a happy childhood. I wasn't abused. I didn't have any ACEs, and I've had many, many mind-body conditions in my lifetime. It's number one, it's part of being human. You have a brain, you have a body. Whenever there's any kind of stress, the brain can cause some kind of physical sensation in the body. A difficult day at work, you can have a headache. Speaking in front of an audience, you can have stomach pain. These are normal physiologic reactions. And you don't have to have ACEs, you don't have to have tremendous amount of stress to get those. But once you get something like that, you can begin to worry about it. You can begin to focus on it. You can begin to be frustrated by it. And this is a vicious cycle that can create chronic symptoms and chronic pain because of the worry about it once it starts, even if it started for something which wasn't the most traumatic life experience in the world.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very well said. I'm curious about when people come to you with urinary issues or overactive bladder, and they say they've been peeing a lot more than normal. It's wrecking their life. They don't really know what's going on. They were checked out by a physician. There wasn't anything structural found. Maybe there was a negative urine sample.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think would be you could say the mind-body cause, or what's happening with the brain and the body to make you urinate more often than you would even like to?
To urinate, and the act of urinating is the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic, the fight or flight and the relaxation response parts of the nervous system. Those are controlled by the brain. So everyone knows that when they're out and about and they're going, they're living, they're out in the world, or they're taking a walk or whatever, and they haven't urinated in a few hours or whatever, and then they get home, they pull up in the driveway, or they get into the door, they're opening the door to their house. All of a sudden, there's that urge to urinate. Mm-hmm. The brain is controlling that. Everyone knows that. The brain controls when you have this urge to urinate or not. And the brain is controlled by our external environment and by conditioned responses. And so when people start falling into this cycle of the brain is activated, the danger signal is activated, and it causes urination, and then it causes it again and again, and pretty soon it becomes habitual, and the brain is just turning on having to urinate every 15 minutes or every hour or every 90 minutes or whatever, even though there's not a lot of urine there. And sometimes people do drink a lot of fluids, so they're drinking a lot of fluids, and that's kind of making things worse. And this has happened to me. It happened to me a few years ago when I was on a car trip, a long trip, and I was drinking a lot. And then I had to pee, and I was in traffic, and I couldn't get off the freeway. And I was holding it. And everyone knows you can hold your urine too. Everyone knows the brain can can say, look, I'm in line, I have to pee, but the line is long, and you wait and you tell your brain it's okay, I'll be fine. And you can do that. Everyone has done that. Anyway, I ran out of the car and I ran into a restaurant, and the bathroom was closed, and I was freaking out, and I was just had to pee so bad. I found another restaurant. I went in, I finally peed. Okay. It was one moment of panic and terror about having to urinate and not being able to find a bathroom. After that, I started urinating every hour. My brain just kind of went into this cycle. And then finally, after a couple of weeks, I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? I need to step back. I can control this. So I would start to feel an urge to urinate, and I would just calm my brain, and I would just breathe. And I would just tell myself I was okay. I just urinated an hour ago. There's not a heck of a lot of urine there. I haven't drinking anything. And then the urge to pee would kind of go away, and then it would come back, and then it would go away. And I would just keep sitting with it, and then it went away for a while. And then it would come back half hour later, and then I would pee. But then I would do it again. And then I just practiced teaching my brain to calm and use the methods that everybody knows how to do to calm their brain and tell themselves they don't have to pee right now. They can wait a little bit. And over time, my brain learned to reverse that.
That's an incredible story. And you pointed out something that is huge there. Just because your body gives you the urge to do something, it doesn't mean that you have to.
Yeah.
And that is conscious awareness. It's if the body becomes the mind, the body continues its habitual patterns. So you interrupted it. You interrupted it in a safe, compassionate way, though. You didn't interrupt it in like fear and like, I've got to get medicine. I've got to go to doctors. I've got to what is going on here?
Yeah. Yeah. Once you really know that you're okay, and that's the key, is if you don't know you're okay, every time you feel the urge, you're going to have a lot of fear. Mm-hmm. And that's going to make it worse because you're ramping up that danger signal in the brain. But everyone knows how to calm that danger signal in the brain. And that's what you're teaching people how to do that. And we're teaching people how to do that so that they can gradually unwind these learned neural circuitry in their brain that's causing this habitual response of pelvic pain or frequent urination. And it happens at night too. People say, how can I control it? I'm waking up at night so many times. Right? I had somebody just emailed me about this week, and they're peeing, frequently during the day, but at night it's ridiculous. And I said, well, let's start with the day, let's start with working at it during the day, seeing that you can have some control over it. You can learn to train your brain to pee less often during the day. And then don't drink after 8 o'clock at night. And then when you wake up at night, say, okay, I woke up, I'll go pee, but I'm okay. I'm safe. Just training your brain that you're okay and telling yourself you'll be fine. And over time, the brain learns, even if it's the middle of the night, you keep telling your brain you're okay, and the brain will learn. It'll calm the danger signal.
And even if you do everything that you just said and it doesn't change at all, would you say that there could be other factors that are emotional in content?
Certainly. So, the overall treatment, that overall model that we use is first understanding how the brain works, understanding that our brain literally creates what we experience, what we see, what we hear, what we feel. The brain controls the pain that we have. The brain controls urination, sexual function, etc. Step one. Step two is the assessment, making sure that there's no structural problem to explain it, making sure that people really know they have a mind-body syndrome, that they really know that. So then they can do step three, which is calming the brain. And that's the pain reprocessing therapy work that we do. After that, then we have the emotion, dealing with the stress and emotions in people's lives. Because for most people, there's a reason why they develop this. And like I said before, maybe the reason it wasn't that big and in the past, but sometimes the reasons are very present. Sometimes the reasons are things that are happening in someone's life right now, relationship with a child, a neighbor, a spouse, a boss, a work colleague. And on top of that, we're also looking at what happened in the past, because what happens is that if someone had a difficult relationship with a father who was critical or demanding, for example, And now they're having a difficult relationship with a boss who's critical and demanding. They can begin to see how those things are playing into making their brain feel afraid because of the priming they had when they were young. And then finally, there's two other components. One is how people treat themselves. Because a lot of times people are kind of hard on themselves, critical of themselves. They blame themselves. They get frustrated with themselves. And that can activate the danger signal in the brain. So that's another critical component. And then finally, the last one is, well, maybe sometimes people need to actually make a change in their life. Maybe they need to change a job or look for a different job. Maybe they need to set some boundaries with a relative or with a neighbor or build a fence or something, you know. Sometimes you have to do something. And so there's a wide range of options we have for understanding what's causing these symptoms and helping people.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that last one to make a change, and that you mentioned it last instead of at the beginning, because we always do want to look inside of ourselves first. But then the things closest to you, very close to you, that you don't want to touch at all, are often the ones that are last to fall. Whenever I was, well, not that this is just a story, but I was dealing with chronic pelvic pain for 5 years. And at the same time, I was in a marriage that was quite imbalanced. There were a lot of challenges with the way that I was being treated, respect and love, and certain dynamics on both sides. But I wouldn't own up to that. I mean, when I went to any visit and someone would talk to me about, I would tell them my story, my symptoms, this and that. They would even ask me about me and my personality and who I'm being, but I wasn't even mentioning that relationship dynamic, which was a huge part of my life. And I did finally have to face that and do something about what was happening in my life externally, which, so yes, by all means, it could be a messenger that something needs to change. It could be changing a job or a relationship or something else. And there are different reasons why we have our subconscious giving us these messengers, which is for our own growth and evolution ultimately, but that's hard to hear and see whenever it's causing pain for you.
Absolutely. I mean, the brain is doing its job. It's not betraying us or trying to torture us. It's trying to alert us. It's like a smoke alarm. And we don't get mad at a smoke alarm for doing its job, but the smoke alarm sometimes is really loud. And the symptoms that our brain produces is sometimes very severe. And obviously can be way out of proportion to the problem or whatever. But nevertheless, if there's an underlying issue, and sometimes the underlying issue is how we treat ourselves, as I mentioned before, how people relate to themselves and feel about themselves and how much they care about themselves and take time for themselves or do things for themselves. And sometimes people are so busy doing everything for everybody else and disregarding themselves that, guess what? Their brain is saying, hey, wait a minute, that's not right. There's a problem here. And it's hard for people to see that because they say, oh, the problem is my groin hurts.
Yeah.
Say, yeah, but what's the cause? What's the underlying cause? Or as you pointed out, I think wisely, the message.
Right. That's wonderful. I'm curious because you've worked with so many patients and practitioners to this point. What common threads have you seen with people who make it to symptom-free? Because many get a little better and they're like, I'm better, I'm managing, etc. Thank you. And then some go all the way to symptom-free. Have you
Sure.
seen any differences and why that might happen for them?
Sometimes, we go back to the basics, and the very first one is, do they really understand that the brain is causing this? Do they really understand that they're not structurally damaged? I saw a guy the other day who was having leg pain and sleep problems. And after the first visit, his sleep problems got completely better, but the leg problems didn't. And after talking to him, it was very clear. He said, oh, I know the sleep problems are coming from my brain, but the leg problems, I have doubt about if there's still some structural problem. And so the sleep problems got better because he was clear that that was his brain. The leg problems didn't because he wasn't clear that that was his brain. And so that's those two things are key factors, knowing that the brain is producing it and that there's actually not a structural problem. Then the third thing is that sometimes people have just a tremendous amount of fear of the symptoms themselves, which is completely understandable. They have so much focus on the symptoms and they're trying to make them go away. And frequently that can be part of the problem, is they're trying so hard to make them go away. They're doing all the work, all the exercises, so much focus on the pain, on the symptoms, on the bladder, on the sexual dysfunction, whatever it is that makes it worse over time.
Why would you say, just I'm curious
Yeah.
about that. I know exactly what you're talking about, that resistance, that trying really hard, that trying really hard to be healed. Even if you're not as scared about the symptoms anymore, that you're not just in fear of the symptoms, but you're like, it's been 7 years. I just really want to live life again. So you're very committed to it. Why is it that that resistance or that pushing and that heavy commitment to healing could keep you from healing? How would you describe that?
Well, a lot of times the people who are working that hard on it are the people who work that hard on everything. They're the people who push and push and push, and it's made them successful. A lot of the people we see are extremely successful, high-level athletes, successful in business, and successful in sports, music, whatever. But the part of and parcel of how they did that was how they put pressure on themselves and how they push themselves. And pushing yourself can be a good thing, obviously, but taken to an extreme, now they're pushing themselves to make this go away. And they're blaming themselves. Why won't it go away? If I was better, if I was stronger, if I was smarter, if I could do this work better, it would go away, but it's not. So therefore, there must be something wrong with me as a person. I need to try even harder. And that's a lack of compassion for themselves. And so a lot of times what's happening is people say, and of course, everyone's going to say this, when my symptoms go away, when my pain goes away, I'll be happy. But unfortunately, the way to make the pain go away is to become happy to start with, to be more content, to be more loving, to be more caring of themselves, have better relationships, to have more purpose and meaning in their life, because chronic symptoms closes you in and makes you withdraw. You're withdrawing from relationships, withdrawing from romantic relationships, withdrawing from physical activities, withdrawing from social activities, and all those things make it worse. And so to expand those little by little, even though you're having the symptoms, can be one of the most important ways that people can find that road to recovery.
Mm. And too bad this wasn't on YouTube in 2013, whenever I was scouring the internet for some answers.
Does it resonate? Does it resonate with you?
It resonates with me, and with many clients that come to me have a similar personality tendency. But for me, that's what was happening too. I tried really hard because, as you said, I tried hard at everything in my life. And I thought, if I just did, if you just give me the plan, I will make it happen. But this was one area of life that I couldn't make it happen with that plan, with that approach. But that's part of the imbalance. I was mentally, emotionally, physically imbalanced in the way I was living my life all the way to that point, which is even a big part of the buildup of what created psychophysiologic disorders for me.
Right.
I'm curious about what you do for yourself in your daily life right now, and not just so that like, oh, let's all copy Dr. Schubiner's morning routine or something like that, maybe, but it's more about what are your daily non-negotiables for living a healthy life, because you know about all of this information. Like what do you make sure this is important that I do every day?
Well, I'm at a different stage in my life now than I was when I was your age. When I was your age, I was, working full time, small children, married, house, family, relationships, a ton of stuff to do, and I had chronic neck pain. So, what I learned back then was that I did need some time and some things that were for me. I needed space. I needed relationships. I needed relationships with friends, men in my life who became close friends and buddies that we could spend time together. having fun and going to, having a beer, but also talking seriously about our lives and what's important in our lives, and sharing and being able to be open and honest, and with them, those kind of relationships I found to be extremely important for me at that point in my life. And the other thing is that I was able to find some kind of hobbies or things that I could do that allowed me to just have a little time and space, and something that I could enjoy and have fun with, and for me it was golf.
Mhm.
And that's been an incredible thing for me. And everybody, or many people, obviously can find things, whether it could be knitting, it could be uh, exercise, it could be racquetball, whatever, music, etc. Now it's much easier, because now I'm only working part-time, and I have time to do my research and my writing and my teaching, and I have time to go to the gym and do my exercise classes that I do with people who I just love and connect with, every morning. So
That's
I'm
fantastic.
pretty blessed right now to be able to have that kind of schedule.
So you do a lot of different things like that. I'm curious, do you have a daily meditation or mindfulness or that sort of practice that you do every day, or just whenever it feels right?
I don't. I've taught mindfulness for many years. I think everyone should learn mindfulness, I practice mindfulness on a daily basis, but I don't have a set time to do it.
Your life is the meditation now.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the
maybe
goal.
that's
Yeah.
maybe that's a cop out, but that's kind
No,
of how I see it. I certainly take, if I'm feeling stressed or bothered or worried, I certainly may take time to meditate. I may take time to write and do some expressive writing about things in my life. I make time to do some emotional work and express emotions that I feel. All those are certainly can be very important.
that's amazing. This has all been extremely helpful for myself and for everyone who's listening. I know it. We're excited to hear any comments, any feedback. Before we wrap up, I'm going to wrap up with a rap because
All right.
I made a song called I Am Safe, and I know that you enjoyed it. It touched you. And I was like,
Good.
I'm going to write Dr. Schubiner a little rap so I can perform it
Awesome.
for you. You hear the music?
I do.
Howard Schubiner, doctor from the north, a real giver, modern oversharing heart, pioneering change in the world still asleep, fit for service, MBS, telling all the peeps, this might hurt but surely it's worth it, knowing who you are and not stopping short of it, symptom scraping, medication crazy, Howard knows the system is blazing, it takes us all to change it. People are screaming, the pain isn't leaving, you showed us our ways and you asked us to face them. I answered the call and I'm here on this job. I walk forth to serve, never worry we will fall. Life is best lived when we give it our all. I would thank you for lighting up the North Star. I give you this strap and share it from the heart. Never stop, flow with the truth, always rises to the top.
Awesome. That's amazing. That's so cool.
I'll be like that. Thought maybe no one has rapped you before in an interview,
No,
so.
no, definitely not. Yeah, definitely not. It's so funny how, how things change and tastes change. When rap came out, it was all foreign to me. It didn't make any sense. And as rap has evolved and rap has been integrated into music that's melodic, and it kind of comes and goes throughout the song, you begin to say, yeah, there's a melodic part, and then there's this rap part, melodic part, and it all becomes like so familiar that our brains have changed. Our brains literally have changed to appreciate rap for the poetry and the rhythms and the beauty of what it is, whereas at the beginning we couldn't see that, or I couldn't. Many people couldn't, and that's kind of what we're doing here in this work. We're helping people change how their brain looks at things. and how their brain interprets things, and how their brain interprets what's happening in their life, what's happening in their body, what's happening in their emotions. And things change over time. And the point of this work is not to get people to be pain-free. It's to get people to be better people.
And there it is. That's the mic drop. That's the mic drop. Thank
To
you
be
so
happy
much.
in their lives.
That's beautiful. So well said. Well, thank you, Dr. Schubiner. We'll definitely have your book, your information, everything linked up, and we'll continue to stay in touch. It was an honor today.
Thank you so much, Michael. Take care.